Surprise, it's me. I'm the shipper update. It's Anthony Smith here, Chief Economist at FreightWaves, and it's Friday, so we're going to talk about the releases for the week, what they mean, what they might mean for you, and our expectations for them moving forward. So jumping into our first one, we have the ISM PMI, which is here in the blue line, and in the green line, we have, of course, something so close to my heart, the flatbed outbound tender rejection index. What we saw in the ISM PMI was that there was a slight downward movement from 57.1 to 55.4 percentage points. If you're not familiar with this index, anything above 50 is indicative of expansion, while anything below 50 is indicative of contraction within manufacturing. We also have the green line here, flatbed, as I mentioned earlier, lined up with it in a comparison, just because manufacturing is going to utilize a lot of those flatbed trailers as we continue to move forward. Looking at this downward movement, it's not that there is a decline in manufacturing or just that it's falling off the cliff here, but there is a bit of a slowdown as it pertains to this ISM PMI index. But there are different subcomponents to here. When we're looking at the different subcomponents of the ISM PMI or the ISM's management index, we're seeing that there is going to be still expansion ongoing and new orders and backlog of orders, although both of those did tick down. One of those areas that we do want to show a little bit more light on is going to be in our next chart here, and that's going to come from something that I think everyone is going to be noticing, and that's going to be the ISM PMI manufacturing prices. The prices component still very much elevated, even though it did have a slight tick down, just ever so slightly of, let's see, 2.5 percentage points here, and it's still at 84.6. That's very much in expansion territory. So even though it can get a little bit confusing, when you look at some of these diffusion index, you look at the downward movement and you think, hey, that means that there's some easing, but it just means that it's growing at a less faster pace until it goes below that 50 mark. And 84, a lot higher than 50. And so we're looking at this chart here, definitely showing that there's still some increased pricing pressure as we continue to move forward within manufacturing. Keeping it still on that same tone of flatbed, let's go into our next chart real quick, and we're going to go into construction spending. Total construction spending here, and the blue line and flatbed, once again, and the orange line here. Something to note when you're looking at this chart, you got to take this in with a little bit of a grain of salt and where you kind of look for these comparisons and what it all means. So when we're looking at total construction spending, we did see a slight slowdown, but should be noted that the construction spending is, surprise, measured in dollars. And so these millions of dollars is going to mean that there's going to be some impact to inflation. So construction spending can keep going up and up and up, while we can see that capacity can shift a little bit with flatbed outbound tender rejection index that we have lined up here with it. So if we continue to see some upward movement here, and you don't see that kind of mimicked as well on the flatbed, or they kind of come out of sync a little bit, that's going to be one of the reasons why. But we do need to watch construction spending just to see how that pace is going along as we continue to move throughout the rest of the year. This is going to be construction spending, for residential, but we also have construction spending for non-res, and we're going to be watching that one closely because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here. We're looking at warehousing as well. There's going to be a lot of expansion in infrastructure. That's going to be one of those things that really slowed down a lot of the supply chain. It's going to be that lack of available infrastructure, and that's going to be something that's going to be a long road ahead. We're looking at how long it takes to put up so many warehouses. We're looking at warehouse space, definitely in a dire need for more of those, especially on the West Coast. So this is going to be an area of potential growth as we continue to move forward throughout, not just this year, but in the years to come as well. Going into our next chart here, keeping it on with this flatbed trend because I love it so much. It's going to have orders, and it's going to be core capital good orders, excluding transportation, things like ships, boats, planes, all those things. And so just because it's going to be a little bit more volatile and throwing off some of the overall trend, we're looking at these core capital goods orders. And so looking at that, we're still seeing that there is some ongoing upward movement here. Similar note, like the construction spending index that we just looked at, this is going to be measured in millions of dollars. So there's going to have some impacts here from inflationary pressures that we did see are still at play here from our first chart in the ISM PMI. What we're still seeing that there is still kind of like, I think, a little bit almost of a flattening, but still very much elevated effect happening for flatbed trailers, especially when you compare them to the other modes of reefer and dry van. So this is going to be one to watch closely for sure. A lot of momentum still in manufacturing, but the expectation is slower, but still ongoing growth when we're looking at that space upstream. Onto our next chart here, we have another indicator. Of course, yesterday was Thursday, so that means we have weekly initial jobs claims updated. So I tick up to 200,000. Not too much of a worrying concern. Some of the if you dive into the details, if you're nerdy like that, you can look at some of the increases in New York and some of the other states and kind of attribute some of it to some teachers taking their, their spring or fall, I'm sorry, not fall, summer break and applying for some assistance there. So there's going to be a little bit of a variance here, especially with the new seasonality change for initial jobs claims. But the big one to kind of take note of here in our next chart, which hit a new high score, and that's going to be 11.5 million, just over that for job openings. Still a lot of job openings are out there, still ongoing, still growing. And our next shipper update, we're going to talk a little bit more about employment as well, because we got an unemployment rate update as well this morning. But that's going to do it for this first shipper update. Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more Freight Raised Meow.